Welcome back to another edition of the NIT Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie O'Leary, and co-host Alec Crowdhamel. We're going to talk about Rutgers basketball a little bit more. What happened with the postseason tournament? We thought we were going to have one, then we ultimately did not. We'll talk about the off-season schedule here. The portal opens in a week. Talk about what we think is going to happen there. But before we get into any of that, this podcast is presented to you once again by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all online betting madness. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from college basketball to a $200,000 bracket contest, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting resource. From every Cinderella story to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more. For every game, every play, and every win, BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay, so Rutgers basketball, we thought that they were going to get a postseason tournament, and then ultimately that ended up not happening. Off the top, Rich, what are you hearing happened with the will they, won't they element of the postseason tournament? Whether it be the Crown, the NIT this season.
Yeah, they applied to both. They got technically, I guess, invited, you could say, so to speak, to both. Like, it's not like the Crown was not taking, like, just about everyone. Like, Arizona State's in it, and they got, 13 wins on the season, I think, 12. So they could have played in one of, or both, or either of them, to be honest with you. But they had the team vote on it, basically, and the team just decided at the end of the day it wasn't in their best interest. It was not unanimous. It was a majority wins vote. I know some players said they would play in it. I know some said they wouldn't. I don't have the specifics. I know I talked to Ace Bailey's people, and they said that he would have played. So there's one yes vote. Among the rest, I don't know. It's tough because some of the guys just weren't getting minutes at all. So, like, if you're not getting minutes at the end of the season, why would you vote yes to keep playing and just keep sitting on the bench when maybe you want to move on, or maybe you just want to get into portal and go find a new spot. So end of the day, the guys voted on it and they just ended up voting no. And that's it. That's where we're at.
Which ultimately I think was the right move. I don't think we need to prolong this season anymore. Like, have us be even more in the spotlight for the disappointment that this season was. I think we just kind of got to move on to next season with a change mindset, a growth mindset, if you will. Like, this can't be the way that we roll into next season as well. I've noticed a lot of teams are hiring. You saw what happened with Iona today. If you don't know, Iona fired Tobin Anderson, who was only in his second year in Iona, but they are seen to be targeting an NBA assistant with the Thunder. It seems like a lot of teams are hiring NBA coaches, NBA assistants. And I think it makes sense, especially at the lower levels, because if you're like, think about what an NBA coach is tasked with doing each season. Like, sure, NBA coaches have systems and have their, how they want to run things, but they're constantly churning through rosters. Like, some teams are lucky enough to have a roster anchored by a superstar, but a lot don't. And so you're constantly trying to bring new players in. Guys are getting hurt. You're bringing guys in on two ways, and it's constantly like a puzzle piece. You have to figure out how all these pieces fit together. And college is becoming like that. Every year is essentially free agency in the offseason, where you're bringing in new guys and trying to make those guys fit together. And it's not always running the same system as last year. It's about figuring out how this roster fits together. And I don't know why that tangent. That came to mind. But
that's interesting, though, because, like, specifically, he was a G League head coach. He wasn't good at it, mind you, but the G League, your roster is not only going through a whole entire change every year, but it's going through a change throughout the season because your players are getting picked up by XYZ team. Yep. You're getting two-way contracts. You're getting 10 days. So you're losing pieces left and right. So it's probably not the worst idea. He just wasn't a good coach at that G League. Yeah. So what makes you think he's going to be a good coach at Iona? But either way, not the point.
Yeah. So speaking of changes that need to happen this offseason, I think a lot of us were waiting to kind of hear, Jerry Carino, for what his post-mortem was going to be. He posted a long article today that I think largely kind of glossed over a lot of, like, the meaty stuff that needs to happen. And I don't know. What did you guys think of that piece? I thought it was It was a bit of kid gloves from Jerry with regards to how the season went.
In the nicest way possible. I don't remember the last time Jerry's ever criticized the Rutgers or even a Seton Hall coach for that matter.
Yeah.
And I get it. You have to work with them daily, so it's tough to do that. But in today's day and age, if I hate that like so many media members are afraid to criticize the coach that they're like covering. Like just tell if they suck, they suck. Like end of story. Both programs straight out, flat out suck this year. There's no way around it. And to start the postmortem piece or post-season piece, whatever you want to call it, with the Nike deal, like I don't really understand where you're going with this. Like no one gives a shit about what logo's on the kids' shoes.
Yep.
They give a shit about what the team did. And was it an offense first roster? Yeah, technically it was, but it wasn't a good offense. Like you can claim like all these other stuff, like, yeah, he had the most points per game in Peichel era since he took over Rutgers coach. Yeah, no shit. When you have 2 of the top 3 NBA draft picks, you're going to have a better offense. But you also had one of the worst defenses, and you pride yourself on defense. And you can't tell me that you couldn't coach these guys on defense or get these guys together on the defensive end. Like it was just an absolute shit show from top to bottom. I think the piece didn't do enough of like criticizing the coaching staff. It was more of criticizing people that aren't there, criticizing the fact that he didn't have donors, and like criticizing the athletic department for not getting those donors. In reality, if you don't like the way something, and we say this all the time, it's Shianoism. If you don't like the way something is, change the way to think about it, or change the what I think that's what it is. Change the way you think about it. And if you're not getting donors and NIL from the athletic department, which a lot of college coaches aren't, this is now a college head coach's job to raise funds. As much as people think it's the athletic department's job to raise funds, which it is to an extent, but it's on the head coach to raise these funds. I know for a fact Greg Schiano was game weeks going to a fancy dinner at place XYZ in New York City to meet with donors, to get the donors locked in, to get NIL locked in for this offseason. And he would have to fly out late Friday night to get to whatever location they're playing at Saturday afternoon. So he was doing it all on his own. Does he want to be doing that? No, of course he doesn't. No college coach wants to be doing that. They want to focus on X's and O's, coaching your team, and high school recruiting on top of it all. But you have to adapt. If you're not adapt, you're going to die, or in this case, get fired. And Peichel just hasn't adapted to that. Like it's a matter of you have to be a fundraiser at the end of the day. You have to be a salesman. You have to be a CEO. You are the CEO of the program. It is your job to raise the funds. It is not, and you can't be blaming Pat Hobbs. We could throw all the blame on Pat Hobbs out the window because it just sounds like
an easy target. Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, the guy that's not here anymore got fired or will quit, and yeah, it's all his fault. It was his fault. Like, no, dude, raise your own funds. Like that's the problem. Like Shiano's got it down to a science, mind you. Shiano's a better salesman, I think, at the end of the day too. So
I also think it's like there are certain schools where, like a Texas, for example, where the coach doesn't really need to do much. They're going to have those funds in the bank. But you've been the coach here 9 years. You know what the deal is. Like if you've gone through 3 cycles now where NIL hasn't been great, and you got a guy in the athletic department in Greg Schiano who is navigating it and in the same situation you are where it's not great. And the other thing Schiano's doing is he's not only targeting alums and donors. Like he is going out and expanding his footprint by engaging business leaders and engaging people on Wall Street. Like there are a surprising amount of people donating to Rutgers NIL for football that have no association to the university other than Schiano recruited them to be a part of it.
That's what drives me nuts is that like basketball, like as much as he's getting stuff for football, basketball is a Northeast sport. You could argue it's a New Jersey, New York sport. Like how are you not able to convince people to donate to a Big Ten program in the Northeast? Like the whole state up and down. And Alec can vouch for this too. Like the other day, Plainfield had
yesterday,
5,000 fans at the game?
By my estimation, yes.
New Jersey is basketball central. And you could argue New York too, but this whole region right here is all about hoops. You can't tell me you can't go out and find someone to go donate money for your hoops program and get to that next level just to convince. And it doesn't have to be a shit ton of money. You just need a good amount. You don't have to go out and be like, hey, money man, I need $5 million from you. No, you got to go out and raise. Okay, I can get $100K here. I can get $200K there. Okay, I can get $50K from this guy, $20K from that guy. Like it's all about fundraising, and that's the end of the day. That's the job now. It's not about coaching. Leave the coaching to your assistants. You have to trust your guys at this point. And they have former head coaches on staff, so it's not like you can't trust your guys. He's trusted his guys for 8 years now, 9 years now. I don't know. I just thought, like, going back to what your original question was, it was a puff piece, and that's what it was at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's ironic. Like, we have a tweet here that we're gonna pop up from the Are You Screw Pod. Jerry Carino on February 16th, February 17th, I forget what the date it was. Somebody was saying, like, we could use a new offensive coach, and Jerry agreed, and he said he'd be writing about that at the end of the season, and then it's not even mentioned in his piece. Like, I just don't get it. It felt to me. Yeah, I'll get into that. Yep, exactly.
A month to the day. Well,
and then doesn't even mention in his article.
To the day.
I don't know.
It's
Alec, what was your kind of read on the piece?
I will say I mean, the information is not wrong, obviously, and you know, some of the reasoning and the what's the word I'm looking for? The reasoning and the some of the analysis. It's valid analysis as well, and you know, while Hobbs is obviously an easy target because he's not here anymore, it is a valid target as well for, you know, kind of undermining the NIL efforts. But yeah, I felt like some of the things of what went wrong could have been more shifted towards, you know, the coaching staff itself. You know, the coaching staff's got to look itself in the mirror, realize, you know, it's been multiple years now where this hasn't worked for us. The process we're doing hasn't worked for us. So now we got to adjust. I mean, I feel like we bring up that Shiana quote all the time now because it's a real thing, especially not even just in sports or in basketball, but in the real world. That's just how it is. So yeah, I think the staff definitely needs to look itself in the mirror and really lock into trying to bring in more money. I mean, that's the simple part of it. That's the simple part of it. And then I don't know how much it's going to work if Steve Peichel tries to get back to his, you know, usual identity of playing hard-nosed defense with rim protection and a lot of, you know, defense-heavy wings, because those guys are hard to get and they're hard to develop, especially in, you know, the age of college basketball where it's, you know, year by year, maybe some guys aren't going to be here next year. So it's a tough situation, and I'm not sure how Rutgers will adjust to it. I don't want to say I'm pessimistic that Rutgers can adjust, but and we didn't see it in the last 2 years with how the season has gone. Maybe there's some reflection, you know, like I said, look yourself in the mirror, realize what isn't working, self-scouting and realizing what you can do better. Yeah, I'm not pessimistic that they can change. I will have to see it to believe it first, though, is how I'll put it.
Yeah, I totally agree that, you know, it's clear that Peichel wants to run his program a certain way, and it's gotten further and further from the reality of how basketball is played today, given his constraints. And I think that's like, as a coach, you also have to be like a problem solver in terms of how the first thing you always think of when you're thinking of how to solve a problem are what are my constraints in the situation. I roughly know how much money I have to spend. I roughly know, or how do I change the constraints that I'm working under? If I know that this is how much money I have to spend, I know that to get to where I want to go with my system, I need to get this much. You need to press every single button. You need to go through every avenue possible to get to that amount in terms of the money you need. And with the house settlement money, with Vegas, we're going to have at least $4 million roughly to work with, which, according to some articles, is you know, roughly $6 million is the amount you're going to need for a top 25 roster. So I think Rutgers will be playing from behind less to start than they have in the past. But at the same time, like, you know the constraints you're under and you know the type of system you want to run. How do I find players to fit that system? Because the last few years, it just seems like we've added guys with no kind of thought as to how they fit. It's just like, who wants to come here? Okay, we played against Noah Fernandez. He hit that game winner. He was tough against us. Let's get him. Zach Martini, he played us tough when we played Princeton. Let's go get that guy. I really like him. Let's, you know, he did have some hits. Like Cam Spencer is like a grand slam addition in the portal. So 100%. I want to give him some credit too. But the majority of the guys, he couldn't hold on to him. Yeah. And I mean, we could, you know, relitigate that situation all we want, but in the end, like there's been way more misses than hits in the portal. And I think it's because we've added guys who, one, don't fit our system, but two, there was no thought as to how these guys would all kind of coalesce together. It was just kind of like we added a bunch of dudes and hoped that we could figure out, because this is kind of what we talked about in the offseason. We talked about the whole like buying stuff from the grocery store analogy, where we had like, we had Ace and Dylan who were like the lobster and the fillet. Then we had a bunch of like jars of jelly. Like we had 3 jars of jelly this season. We had, some Himalayan rock salt that we added, but we didn't really have like the side dish. We didn't have any kind of, starch. We didn't really have something that made sense together as a meal, but we had some really high-end cuts of meat that we were working with. So it just never really came together as a meal without, I don't know. There wasn't like the chef's mind to how this roster came together. It was more of just like, you just buy a bunch of random stuff from the grocery store. That's how it felt.
Yeah. It's scheduled too. Like I know they were talking about like he complained about it and said in the last game of the season, and he was like, all right, yeah, maybe I went it a little too hard. And you look at it, and you look at like who made the tournament. UNC 1-12 in Q1. Xavier 1-9 in Q1. Play as many Q1 games as you can. It's proof even if you fucking lose them, you're still going to make the tournament.
Just
you
look at
can't lose
last
the
night.
shitters. Like you can't go to Kennesaw State.
That's the problem.
You can't do that. I don't care if it was a nice gesture. You had him signed already. I get it. Homecoming for him. Schedule the tougher team in the region. Don't schedule the cupcake in Kennesaw State. And now everyone's going to be like, yeah, well, they made their conference final. They almost won the conference tournament. No one gives a shit. They were still ass on the year. Like they were 5th in their tournament. Like they're not good. No high major ever goes to a mid major voluntarily. It's just stupid, and there's a reason no one does it. There's a reason why everyone's like, wow, Pikel, what an interesting idea. Everyone on Twitter is also like, you lose that game, you're fucked. And look what happened. You're fucked.
Well, Alabama also did the same thing for Grant Nelson. They played at North Dakota, and then Trace Eagle staff drops 41 on them, and they almost lose that game.
Yeah, it's too risky. Don't do that shit. Just schedule Q1s, and you're good.
Yeah, what did we do when we played in Toronto for Eugene Omori? And
should have been there, too.
It was St. Bonaventure, I think.
He also left before that game even happened.
Exactly. So we'll probably talk about this more throughout the offseason, but I just felt like that was kind of a kid's glove treatment by Jerry, and I don't have any problem with Jerry specifically, but I mean, I think a lot of people look to him to be a leading voice, and when he kind of, for lack of a better term, makes a bunch of excuses for how the season went instead of really kind of looking at it, I don't know, but looking at it from a tougher lens. I don't know. Not trying to we're not trying to start an argument here, but I just felt like it was not as tough as it should have been. But
then you end the article too with we reached out to interim AD Pasari and he didn't answer. And it's like, okay, we're going to blame the athletic department again next year when they don't have an AL.
Yep.
It's frustrating.
Very frustrating. The portal opens in in a week.
Mm-hmm.
How many guys do you think they keep from the current roster? Obviously, we're excluding seniors who are graduating. So that's PJ Hayes, that's Zach Martini, that's Tyson Acuff. That's 3 of the 12 scholarships. Then you have Ace and Dylan, who will almost certainly be declaring for the NBA draft. So that's another 2. So of the remaining, 7 guys who are on scholarship who could come back, how many guys do you foresee them retaining for next season? Because we got the 4. So we got the 4 freshmen.
More of a visual guy here.
Yep. So between Jordan Durkak, Agbole, Jeremiah Williams, JaMychal Davis, Bryce Storch, Lathan Somerville, and Dylan Grant, how many of those guys do you think that will retain for next year?
Alec, you can go first on this one.
Oh, jeez. I'm still thinking too.
Well,
how about this? I'll set the over under. I'll set the over under at 3.5. Alec, do you think they go over or under that number?
3.5 guys returning?
Yep, 3.5 guys who, out of that list that we talked about, returning. Yeah.
I'm gonna go over. I think.
Okay.
I think 4 return. But again, I have no idea. But yeah, I think 4 return. in my guesstimation.
All right, Rich.
Let's see. One. I think Jeremiah leaves. I'm going to go specifics, too. I think Jeremiah leaves. I think Lathan leaves. I think Agbole leaves. It's J Mike one that's going to be interesting to me. I'm going to say under 3.5, but it's going to be very close. I feel like I could see J Mike leaving.
I feel like the one the main one that Richie and we still are up in the air about is Lathan, I think.
That's the question mark, yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise I think we have the same amount.
So you got Dylan Grant twice on the 27-28.
Yep, there we go.
So I honestly do think
here too.
It's over. I think Agbole comes back because what else is he going to do? Like, he is a guy that I think Agbole would make a great third center, which is
third. That's the problem. Yeah.
So I think we keep him. I think J Mike comes back because he seems like a guy who fits the program well. I think Lathan and Grant, I think they find a way to keep both of them, and I think Dortch comes back. So I'm going to go with 5, but I think Jordan's gone. I think Jeremiah's gone.
Jordan's the interesting one. I'm curious what he does.
I think he stays, honestly. I think, and the Rutgers Rant also said this on their podcast, talking about this similar roster construction for next year. I think one of Durkak or Davis leaves, and the other one stays.
I could agree with that. I think it's dependent on staff, too. Like, if, say, a Brandon Knight leaves for a mid-major job, I could see J Mike going with him.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
And I mean, could you say the same if, I mean, not that we're saying this is going to happen, but just hypotheticals, if someone like a TJ Thompson leaves, maybe Durkak follows him as well? Because I think TJ was the one that recruited him, right?
Yeah, TJ is also Aiden's recruiter.
Right.
So it would make sense there. But where would TJ go? That's the question mark. I don't think TJ is going to have as much interest as B Knight would. B Knight would probably get considered for a couple head coaching jobs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we're in search season, as Curry Hicksage would say. And given that our season is over, I think if Brandon Knight's going to find a job, it's going to be in the next week, because you have these schools who, or maybe not in the next week. So I should restate that. If he is the top choice, if he's the top choice for any of these openings, we'll know in the next week if he's going there. But sometimes these schools have their 1A and they're still in the tournament and they make it to the second weekend, and that extends things an extra week. I don't foresee an NCAA tournament program, at least in the high major sector, targeting Brandon Knight.
No,
but we'll see.
I mean, look at Minnesota. Their number one target right now is Nico Medved, and they're in the tournament right now too. So that could potentially hold it up if they go on a run at Colorado State.
That's all but done, though, right? I think.
Yeah, I think so. That's a really good hire too. I mean, they probably that was going to be the hire all along. So yeah,
Minnesota guy. The only one I could see B Knight getting considered from high major, and we've said this time and time again, would be if Pittsburgh opened up.
Yep.
But I feel like if Pitt would have opened up, they probably would have already. But yeah, I agree.
It's true.
So the portal opens in a week. Any names that you think we should keep an eye on early? I know that there's still plenty of time for guys to enter, and they will. But anybody that comes to mind or anything you're hearing name-wise, Rich, to keep an eye on?
Isaiah Cottrell is a guy they considered a couple portal takes ago. There's a kid from Campbell, and I say this because John Mitchell is an assistant at Campbell, but he's not considering Rutgers. He's probably going to get paid pretty well. I forget what his last name is. It's like Ludwig or Lidwig, or I forget what it is exactly. There's really not like a specific name out there currently. Jonathan Lamathe, I thought, was an interesting one. Former Maryland, played in the Big Ten. Wasn't too good in the Big Ten. Went to North Carolina A&T for a year, now back into portal. 4-star out of high school, considered Rutgers pretty heavily. I think took an official. If it wasn't an official, it was multiple unofficials. But averaged 13, 7, and 3 last year with North Carolina A&T. Obviously, different level of basketball, too. Let's see. What else we got out here? There's a couple local schools that are losing kids, like who was it? Buffalo has a couple kids on there. Loyola Maryland, actually, ironically, has a couple dudes that are entering the portal that average double digits. There's so many options out there with basketball because of how many D1 teams there are. There's a Central Michigan guard I saw entered yesterday, Jacoby Heady. I think it's Heady. Chicago, Illinois native, grew up in Michigan. We know Smoke has every connection in the world when it comes to Michigan guys. Also, Smoke coached at Central Michigan, mind you, before this kid got to Central Michigan, but still could be, I guess, something to monitor. Wagner's got a couple dudes in the portal that average double digits. Like there's just so many names out there. It's going to be tough to kind of break it down until they start, I guess, visiting basically. And that's when you start to figure out more. But there is a lot of options out there. We'll wait and see. But right now, looking at that team, like the essentials of what you need is you need a rim protecting big man, clear as day. You need a guard to lead your backcourt, because if I'm going into next season with Dirk Hack, J. Mike, and Lino Mark, we got a fucking problem.
Oh God!
Sorry, Caden Powers is a backcourt guy too, but no, we got an issue of this is what we're going into next season with. So at least the lead guard, if not two guards, because you need someone to score the ball. Like Dirk Hack, yeah, mind you, one good game, great. Other than that, kind of meh. J. Mike, offensively, is just not there. Lino Mark, I think, talented, but he's also had his struggles in high school this season. Also missed some time with injury. Could be playing a factor. And Caden Powers is just a 3-point guy. He's really not anything explosive yet. I think he's going to be a project. So you got a backcourt that needs a lot of fucking help. So
needs a lot of help. They need wing defenders. You know, if you can develop Bryce Dortch this offseason, I think he's got a lot of potential. I think if you point to guys who made the most progress this year, Dylan Grant's probably number one. Yeah. Bryce Dortch is probably number two. So if those guys both come back and develop in the offseason, I think those guys could fit the archetype of like a Caleb McConnell type player. Not saying they're going to be the level of player, but those are the archetypes that Pikel has. I'd love to get a senior level guy who had that same skill set in two guards, and I think you need at least 4 portal guys.
I don't know if you can play. Well, you can't play Dortch and Grant at the same time, really.
Probably not.
So there goes one spot right there. Like that's probably the 4-man spot, which is fine. I think they can man that spot pretty solidly. Between Lathan and Emmanuel, find a center. You need someone else, like you said. Emmanuel cannot be center 2 next year.
No. He's the type of guy you throw in when you need 5 good minutes, and you just are like, just go hack Golden. Don't let him get an open shot. Like if you foul him, you foul him. He's a terrible foul shooter, but just eat some fouls up. That's fine. Like that's the kind of player he is, and that's not a very useful player.
No. That's just lacking that 3-man spot that Pikel's kind of had, like, pretty well manned over the past couple of years. Like Caleb McConnell manned it, obviously, for 4 or 5 years now. So that was like the perfect fit for that 3 spot, but you don't have anyone that can really man that currently. If you're playing Grant and Dortch at the same time, just call it a season. Call it a career at that point. I don't know. There's a lot that needs to be done.
I did see someone. So he doesn't really have a connection to Rutgers at all. But for a rim protecting big, I think this is a pretty good option. The guy Isaiah Nelson from Arkansas State. He was someone I found last year as someone that could have potentially taken over as a Cliff replacement. He ended up not going into the portal. He's a junior now. He still might not enter the portal this year. Who knows? But I mean, his offensive rating has been pretty solid, and then he's also, he's got pretty solid defensive numbers. One of the best, actually the best rebounder in the Sun Belt. One of the best shot blockers in the Sun Belt. Again, not really much of a Rutgers connection. He's from Georgia. He went to Arkansas State. And if he does enter the portal because of the big man market, I'm sure he'll get plenty of high major attention. But this is a guy that I found last year, stayed at his same school, and honestly got even better as a junior. Arkansas State made it all the way to the Sun Belt Championship and lost to Troy. But that's someone that I could see get a big payday in the portal. I was looking through a lot of guys last year. Like Amari Williams was one of those guys I was on early in like late February as someone to look out for, and obviously we saw what he did at Kentucky. That's my contribution for the portal looking at for the day.
The other problem is like, yeah, money is going to be the deciding factor, but we know Rutgers doesn't have a significant amount compared to most schools, which is whatever.
Compared to most high majors.
High majors, yeah. You also have to convince these kids to come to a program where you might be on the hot seat compared to most. It's not an easy sell. You've made the tour. You're not no offense to him, but it's not a winning program either.
Yeah.
It's a tough sell to these kids. Okay, if I get close to equal money and a little less from, say, St. John's, I'm going to St. John's. Like at this point, like obviously St. John's will pay a lot, but I'm trying to think of another local that will pay like similar amounts but is winning. I don't know if there is one really.
I mean, not exactly. It's not that local, but Maryland could be in contention for a lot of these players as well. You're losing Queen. I think you're losing Reese. And Providence is kind of in a similar situation to Rutgers, where Kim English is kind of on the hot seat going into this year.
It's true. I just don't know. Like, if it's going to be close to equal money, it's a hard sell to go to like, hey, you want to go to Rutgers and
UConn?
We don't play offense, so it's crazy. I don't know.
Also UConn. So
UConn, yeah, but they pay a lot too, though.
Exactly.
It's going to be a tough sell. It's going to be a tough portal haul, I feel like. And anyone that thinks they're getting high major portal guys should probably just X-nay that. That ain't happening.
Yeah.
You saw it last offseason. It's going to be similar to – not similar in that matter of production because those guys didn't work out, but I think it'll be similar in terms of like, hey, we'll grab like a low major guy or two and then go to the mid-major, grab two. And that's unfortunately what it's going to be like. It's just like football, though. Like football did that, and it works at times. Like Eric O'Neal's from the mid-major, quote-unquote, G5, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And it's probably going to be your best defender, edge rusher in God knows how long. But you have to be able to land those high-caliber G5, high mid-major guys. And without NIL, it's going to be tough. So I think it's going to be like those mid-caliber / low-caliber guys from those lower levels.
Yeah, I agree. It's just all going to be about fit and all about getting some experience on the roster for next year because, Rick Pitino has said it. He's not even going to recruit high school kids anymore because they can't play defense at the level that he needs them to. And, they might not be NBA prospects that you're bringing in, but they're going to be much better for the time period you need them than maybe the 17th ranked kid in the country is. So, I mean, that's the thing is like the NBA draft is all about projection. Like you're looking at tools, you're looking at upside. Like very rarely are these guys even close to finished products when they're leaving college. Like occasionally you do, like occasionally like a Frank Kaminsky goes like 10th overall because he's a 5th-year senior and, he had a title run and you can kind of see like, oh, this will fit nicely into our rotation next year. He can plug and play right away, do exactly what we need. Whereas a guy like Ace Bailey, like you're talking about what he can be at like 23, not what he is right now at 19.
Did you see what he did though yesterday? He's hosted a kid from Europe, like a guy that's playing like professional basketball in Europe. So while he's not going to high school route, it could be a route that Pike has to explore a little bit more. We know they were in on the Turkish kid that went to, mind you, he didn't do that well at Nebraska, but Burke, I don't even know what it was. Buchanan-Sell, yeah. I don't think he didn't do bad, but I don't think he did good at Nebraska, if I recall. But either way, I think you have to go after, if you're not going to land these high school kids, go after the European guys. These guys have all played professional since they're like, 12? Like at this point? Like, jeez.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I got an advocate for the European guys.
So we've gone 34 minutes talking about the Hoop Squad. We'll have more for you guys this offseason. Is there anything else you guys wanted to hit on before we head out of here today?
Yes. Imagine saying before the season that Rutgers women's basketball would be playing in the postseason and the men's team would not. But that's the reality. The women's basketball team got a WNIT bid last night, and they will be playing. I don't know who, I don't know where, I don't know when, because for whatever reason the pool of teams gets announced Sunday night, but they don't announce the actual brackets and all the matchups and all that stuff until Monday. I don't really know why that's the case, but as of now when we're recording, I don't know where or when or who they are playing. By the time this goes up, you probably will. But yeah, Rutgers women's basketball is headed to the WNIT as an at-large out of the Big Ten. They are one of two high majors, or I guess high major if you count the count the Big East as a high major. Butler also made it, but those are the only two high major teams in the WNIT, the 48 team WNIT.
College basketball crown might have a better bracket than NIT for men's. Hot take, not
you're
really,
right.
but
I mean that was kind of going to happen when you have three high major conferences only playing in that one.
Yeah, I am intrigued to see how many teams actually turn that down. Like I saw Ohio State turn it down. Technically, Rutgers turned it down. Penn State turned it down. Like
Indiana.
Indiana. It's interesting. If they expand the field on that, I think it could eventually take over the NIT quicker than we think.
Yeah.
Which I'm all about. Screw it. Why not bring something new?
Another note on the WNIT. The highest net ranking team in the field is Purdue at 88. Purdue Fort Wayne at 88. And then the lowest ranking is Stonehill at 318. The average net ranking of the 48 teams in the WNIT field, 165.
It's like 47 too many.
Yeah, Rutgers is at 119 in the net. So they're actually in the upper, they're above average in terms of net ranking, which makes sense. I would hope that the Big Ten team is in the upper half of the net rankings.
I got distracted by a video, but did you mention why the NIT in women's is more or less popular than the NIT in men's?
No, I didn't. I probably should have. In the interest of time, I'll keep it short. But basically, the NCAA started the WBIT, which is different from the WNIT, last year. The WNIT is more independent, so I'm not sure if the NCAA wanted to start one of their own or what, but the WBIT is the higher regarded one than the WNIT nowadays. The WBIT has 32 teams, and it's like it's basically the men's NIT in terms of being NCAA backed and the prestige of teams and all that. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll be back later in the week, I'm sure. Nothing planned at the moment, but there's always something to talk about with Rutgers sports, regardless of where we sit on the calendar. So we will, I'm sure, talk to you later this week. But I want to thank you once again for listening. For me, Richie and Alec, this has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.